Hey guys, it's Andrew. Or as my cousin David suggested this morning, the Urban Bayman. We are working with handles, and apparently, as we prepare ourselves for a podcast, which I'm assuming is going to come eventually, it's certainly something that we're working towards. One of the handles that we're playing with is, yes, the Urban Bayman, and I've been carrying this one for a while. For those of you who aren't from Newfoundland, okay, that the Urban Bayman may require a little interpretation, and seems like an appropriate place to do so, because right behind us is the Overpass, all right? And you'll hear Newfoundlanders often make reference to the Overpass. And when they say the Overpass, it was at a time when this was the only overpass. All right, one of the things that you need to recognize about Newfoundland, okay, is that, and again, remember, Andrew speaks in generalizations. So, everyone in Newfoundland looks just like me. Now, it only makes sense that everybody in Newfoundland would look like me because I'm related to everybody in Newfoundland. And of course, again, when I say talk like this, you know what I mean, right? There's only 500,000 people in Newfoundland right now. All right, we all derive pretty much. Now, obviously, look, there's outliers, but for the most part, there's only been one single mass migration. Every single person in Newfoundland, almost to a man, hails from the Bristol Channel in England and from the county of Waterford in Ireland. In the days of the migratory fishing, vessels would leave Bristol, they would leave Poole and Dorset and those communities, those cities. They would sail out the Bristol Channel, they would cross St. George's, they would land in Waterford. In Waterford, they would take on victuals, they would take on young men, right? Younger men than me, but they looked an awful lot like me. Right? This went on for years and years and years until eventually they started to settle here. Right? One migration between 1754 and 1830. 30,000 young men and women who looked something like me, or at least like my children would look these days, migrated to the island of Newfoundland. Now, guys, when everybody looks just like me, I don't know if it's our nature, if our desire, there's something within us that makes us need to segregate. Right? Despite the fact that everybody looks like me. And when everybody looks like me, you have to find different points of segregation. We talked earlier in one of our blogs about religion, right? And yes, there was that identity. I mean, like I just said, they came from the Bristol Channel, they came from Ireland. So there's a Catholic and there's a Protestant component there. But aside from that, there was another point of division, or would be based on where you were from. So if you were from St. John's, it meant that you lived on this side of the overpass. Now imagine, right, how grand they were. There was one overpass in all of Newfoundland. If you lived on this side of the overpass, you were considered a townie. If you lived on the other side of the overpass, and God knows you have to love the names up there, look, Paradise. You lived around the bay. You were a Bayman, you were from the bay. Now, it's amazing because in Newfoundland, there's nowhere you can stand. In fact, I would argue that heading right due east of here, the city of St. John's is the biggest bay in all of Newfoundland. But there's nowhere in Newfoundland where you can stand and be more than 92 kilometers from the ocean. So it's all one big bay. Yet, for the purposes of delineation in Newfoundland, we would refer to Bayman, two classes of people, Bayman versus townies. Guys, we're all one and the same. There's no doubt about it. I was raised in Topsail on the other side of that overpass, and yet every single morning our parents would lug us into St. John's to school. My nickname all growing up was Bayman. When I was going to school in St. John's, my nickname was Bayman. And it wasn't until I moved to Cornerbrook on the west coast of Newfoundland. And I'll never forget people, as soon as you'd open your mouth, right? It's not hard to tell where you're from, isn't it? Because I do have a bit of a St. John's twang, a dialect from the city of St. John's, and that is very recognizable to the people in Cornerbrook. Right? I remember one time trying to explain to a fellow by the name of Roy Barker. Roy Barker was from Bayvert. He was visiting Straddling, made that same comment. I never had to tell where you're from, is it? And I was explaining about, being the Bayman and all this sort of stuff and growing up in Topsail. And he's like, hold your breath, young feller. Is anything east of Bayver to St. John's as far as we's concerned. It was then that I decided I'd be best to take the handle Urban Bayman. Urban being my schooling in St. John's and the time that I spent there. The Bayman growing up in Topsail, where, yes, it was very much a bay community. We lived on the ocean in Conception Bay. We were surrounded by family. There's McCarthy's and Murphy's and McBride's everywhere in Topsail. So we really did have the best of both worlds, and we got to have a rather interesting perspective and some interesting insights. Of course, growing up in a tourism company, we really came to understand our history, to appreciate our culture, and to know people from all over the island. Recognizing, of course, that not only do they look just like me, they act a lot like me too. So if we do decide to go with the Urban Bayman, at least now you'll have a better understanding of where that handle comes from. I hope you're enjoying these little vignettes and soon to be podcasts, and look forward to staying in contact. Thanks for listening, guys.